panellists as well. There are a number of different challenges facing various different parts of the business for us. So I think the key thing in terms of trying to keep the proposals original is learning and understanding enough about the customer in the first place. So the team will spend a lot of time reviewing sales reports, looking at historical data, making sure that the presentations that they then deliver to the customers are absolutely focused on the types of books that they've got a track record of selling, basically. And this is quite difficult because we're selling to about 196 countries. English is not their first language in most of them. The section of English language books within those shops is also quite small. So you're really fighting for space. And the other thing that we also have a challenge with is just encouraging them to break out of the bestsellers, because you'll see all of the major bestsellers at any point in time in the UK or the US presented really well in export markets, and it's just encouraging them to take that risk. So getting a debut author broken into an export market is really challenging, but I think, like I say, it's just about trying to tailor the presentations and making sure that they understand that this is a book that they should really support. And I think the type of selling that we do, it's really consultative. We're not pushy salespeople here at Bloomsbury. We do want to really understand and listen to the challenges that they're facing as well, to make sure that we really are delivering the books that we believe will sell. And I think there's a huge amount of trust between us and the international customers that we work with. So it's just building on those relationships, really, and then them really, you know, sometimes taking a risk. Raven's been quite an interesting example, really, of trying to get a whole new imprint. There aren't many publishers, really, that are doing what we're doing, and really encouraging them to take that risk. And I think because they do trust us, they have been supporting books that they wouldn't normally. I think the other thing with Bloomsbury as well, it's always so frustrating. It's a brilliant thing, but it's also a curse when you just try and encourage customers to think beyond Harry Potter. You know, we have this incredible range of books, but we also have a whole range of other titles too, and I think that that's the kind of ongoing challenge that we're facing. So I think that it's just about, I think more about the focus and the tailored presentations. I think they're the key things, really, when we're trying to encourage international customers to take a punt on other books. So
that's great, thank you. I'm going to move on to Greg now, because the time is running away with us. It's like being caught in a Raven novel or something. I don't know when we're going to wake up as tomorrow. Greg, you have been shortlisted for an award. I can't remember what it is. There's so many awards, it's hard to keep track.
British Book Design and Publication Award.
Could you tell us a bit about how you came up with the idea? How many, if you can talk a little bit about the process and how many versions and iterations you went through to end up with this fantastic and very striking and clever cover.
Well, this is quite an easy one, actually. That sounds really big-headed, but the brief was incredibly simple. It was just, can you do a typographic cover, purely typographic? And which is just as well, because it's got so much bloody text on there. I don't think I could fit anything else on. So the book is about why the author is no longer talking to white people about race, because they're not engaging with her. When she tries to broach the subject of race, they sort of back away, shy away, don't want to know anything like that. And I thought, well, how can I sort of add to that argument? Because we could just put this out, all black text, and see what happens. But I thought, if you're, this kind of notion of white supremacy and sort of, I don't know, white nationalism, all that sort of stuff, if you treated it like, and the idea that these people aren't engaging in conversation like a ghost, and then sort of treated the text like that, then that might have more impact as well. And so that's what this sort of blind debossing does on here. And so I think what I wanted to do is, when you walk in a bookshop, if you were to see this from afar, so probably at the back of the room, it probably reads, well, I'm no longer talking about race. And then you'd be like, oh, well, that's quite interesting, it's quite shouty. And then when you got closer, you realise there's this second hit. It's been quite interesting. It's just, I think it's not controversial, but I think, it's definitely opened up conversations, which is good, and which is what should be happening, because it's a book that is really, sorely needed these days. And I think today it's publishing in North America and Canada, which is fantastic. And Rennie's been all around the world promoting this and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, this is a case of like a really, it's a simple cover, but it's just trying to be impactful. And there's other, sorts of things about it, which is what I didn't realise until later. There was an exhibition on at the British Museum about American poster kind of propaganda, and there was a movement in the 1980s called Guerrilla Girls, and it was this group of female artists who were protesting the fact that, in the Guggenheim or the Museum of Modern Art, there wasn't a single female artist or a black female artist or anything like that, and this is the typeface they used. And so that was quite nice to find out. And there's other things as well, like in book design, you can sort of add other sort of dimensions to sort of back it up. So, for instance, if you take off the jacket, it's got obviously black bores, but it's got black foil running down, and also ebony end papers. And then on the top you have you have head and tail bands at the top and bottom. So you have black on one side and white on the underside, if you are so geeky to have a look. But it's been really nice to work on, because I think, as I say, it's a book that talks about, all the the sort of problems we have in modern Britain, and there's someone who's brave enough to speak up about it, and all that sort of stuff. And I've had funny looks on the tube reading this. And I've seen on Twitter other people, but it's good that it's getting people talking. And I think sorry, I'm going into your second question, which is why it's.
You can go straight into the second question.
Well, it's just that I think it sort of resonated because we need something like this in the UK, and I think it's also, I think it was quite interesting when we first went to the launch night. I think Alison was with me as well. And it was a really good, big audience, mainly full of people of colour who are resonating with this. But I think, well, maybe speaking in advance of Rennie, but I think as she's gone on and she's done all these events around the world, a lot of white people have come in and engaged with the book, and they'll be like, why? I need to read this just to sort of, get some history and some context, and maybe, all that sort of stuff has become interesting. So that's that, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it is a fantastic cover, and I'm not quite sure when the awards are, but good luck.
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, fingers crossed for that.
Yeah.
It's really nice to get those typographical ones, and it's a different kind of brief. This is a really interesting question, I think, and quite a hard one to answer. Where do you draw your inspiration for your designs?
I keep track on. There are many hundreds of really good, better than me designers on Twitter and Instagram and all that sort of stuff. And there's also sort of tastemakers, guys who have blogs about which covers are the best in the world at the moment. It can be from Australia, America, over here and stuff like that. And so I do a bit of that, and just try. There's always trends in graphic design, particularly book cover design, and particularly books that have done well, because you'll then find on a brief, oh, can we make it look like the Essex Serpent? I'm like, I'm just like, oh, for goodness sake, or something like that. So I think it's good to sort of keep fresh. I think if you look at, this applies to, I guess you guys as well. It's like if you have it's like having a big wheelhouse. If you have a tiny little shed and you're happy in your shed and you're not looking outside, but if you have a big wheelhouse, you're happy to learn new skills and get lots of new tools in there and that sort of thing, and then it's going to keep you fresh and you'll keep doing fresh work. And also, I think that if you try and get some sort of human emotion into the cover, if you can, if there's ever the opportunity for it, then that might resonate with a book buyer as well, and that might, if you've connected with someone, then that's a positive thing, I think, as well. But
that's great, thank you. I'm going to ask myself a couple of questions now, which is a bit strange, doing the marketing thing. So there are a couple of marketing questions. The first one was about campaigns, and which campaigns in the last year are you particularly proud of, and why do you think they worked? And I've gone a bit Me Too, actually, because I want to talk about this book again, The Silent Companions, not just because Alison's sitting next to me, but this wasn't me. This was the adult marketing team who did this campaign, Philippa and Janet and lots of other people. We don't actually have global rights in this title, so we don't have the US rights. I don't know who's got the US rights. So we're sorry?
Viking.
Yeah. I thought you said something ruder there. It came out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're selling this in Australia, India, and UK, and sort of the rest of the world. But one of the things is that it's with the marketing, global campaigns are kind of where it's at. So we have to think about how it's going to work across all markets, if you like, elsewhere around the world. And I pulled out when the teams do a big marketing and publicity campaign, they send around a note. This isn't obviously for all our titles, but I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is like 8 pages of stuff that they've done. It's absolutely incredible. And so the book published on the 5th of October. So it's all about timing. As Alison said, it's a ghost story. And so it was ideal timing for Halloween, obviously for gifting, for Christmas as well. It got picked to be Simon Mayo's Radio 2 book club book, which was fantastic, and you have to submit that, and obviously there's a lot of competition for that. But when I was reading it through, one of the things that the team did was they sent a very nice advance proofs for London Book Fair. I don't know if any of you went to London Book Fair or can remember it. It seems like a distant memory now. It was like 7 months ago. So one of the things with our really key titles is the campaign is slow burn. It's a long-term kind of commitment and build. So special proofs were sent out to key people in advance of London Book Fair. Then we also sent out special candles were made, sent them out to the main influencers. A lot of copies going out to vloggers and bloggers. Harrogate, the Theakston Crime Festival there in October. Lots of events. The author, and I think this is something that distinguishes Bloomsbury as well, is that everybody here reads. They read a lot, and you come in the morning and you talk about, I came in this morning and one of my team said, I finished Home Fire last night. It's just amazing. Because we've been talking and I've not really known what to tell her about the book because I didn't know how far she got through it. But we had the author come in. One of the things we do a lot is we have authors come in and they give talks. And Laura Purcell, who wrote The Silent Companions, came in and she was so sweet and nice. And you thought, how could you write this terrifying book? But she's been really busy. So she's been fantastic. She's been all around the country. She's been signing. She's been at events and everything. So it's sort of multifaceted. We did a thing as well with an online through the Pigeonhole reading group where people can get chapters. So it's like an online book club, but you have to kind of read it in a paced way, so you're all reading it together. You can't kind of rush on ahead. So those are sort of some of the obviously we've got fantastic window displays. Things in Waterstones and other book chains. So I think it's an awful lot of work. It starts very, very early on. Some of it's really like lovely, smart, clever ideas like the candles and things. It's great to have a beautiful jacket. It helps so much having these lovely covers that Greg and the other designers produce because that makes life a lot easier. If you've got something, this is something I've learned over the years, if you've got something really great to sell, it's a hell of a lot easier than selling something that's rubbish. It's so much easier. And so having these beautiful jackets just means that the booksellers want to put them in the window, they want to do displays, people talk about them. If you've got these keen authors, and then everybody at Bloomsbury kind of buys into the book and gets behind it, but it starts early on. It reminded me, looking back at these pages, of the work that the team have done, how early it starts. So like Alison says, it takes a year. We know a year in advance that the book's coming, and then as soon as we can get the proofs and we can start drip feeding it out, telling people, the guys ran a competition to win a weekend in a haunted hotel
I
in
think that
Rye.
one is still running.
It's still going. Marie Claire, if you can hop online.
The most haunted pub in Rye.
Yeah, so they've done so many different things. So competitions, they've sent out soulless emails. There's been lots of ads on the website, pushing people to buy. So it's very much omni-channel, and but starting early. So that's, I think, a fantastic example of a campaign, and it peaked at 42 on Amazon. I checked it this morning. It's still in the top 900. which isn't bad going when you've got all the Christmas books and the Beano Annual and David Walliams and everybody out and all the foodie books. So, and it's number 6 in Ghosts.
Yeah.
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 So it's still right up there, and that's a month after publication. So although we talk about the long tail, with especially in academic marketing, that the trade books all sell very quickly and then they kind of fade away, but academic keep on selling. This book is just going to go and go because the guys have planned this campaign that wasn't all about one big hit. It started 6-7 months ago, builds up to publication, then it doesn't fall off, but it takes on new life. And it kind of carries on in a different way. So I think that's a fantastic campaign.
Yeah, one of the things, this is possibly quite boring, but you need to know about like metadata and Amazon and things like that. Sorry, now this is getting worse. We've changed the metadata on Amazon, so before we talk about ghost stories, now we're talking about this is like the perfect book to read on a winter's night to curl up with, because actually that kind of messaging is quite important. I mean, when I started publishing this, didn't even exist, we didn't have ebooks or anything, but but that's the kind of thing that now comes into sort of marketing and editorial, is actually how do we keep things going, how do we change the metadata. And I mean, it's interesting, like with Stu's book, which we're just getting all the really amazing advanced quotes now from people. We've tweaked the metadata because we said it was like Agatha Christie, and obviously Murder on the Orient Express has just come out, so that's going to be fresh in people's minds. So you're also, although you plan stuff really far in advance, you also want to be really reactive to things that are going on. I don't know if you're going to talk about George Saunders, but in terms of like... I
wasn't, I could, because he's just so lovely and wonderful.
Yeah.
But no, the next question, and the final one before we go to the Q&A, because I'm very aware that we've got sort of 15-20 minutes left, was about social media. So the question was about how do you make your book stand out from the crowd on social media? So this got me thinking, because we have a head of social media and a couple of people who work with her across all the titles, but then the individual marketers look after their individual like Twitter accounts or blogs or Instagram. So we've got about 35,000 people following us on Twitter on the main Bloomsbury Books account. Instagram has been massive success story for us in the last couple of years, and so I was thinking today, how do we do such a good job? How do you make things stand out? Back to those lovely covers again. Instagram, we are very, very fortunate, but we take really high quality photos. We really take care. We take care, and it's back to that thing about everybody in the company really loving and caring and kind of buying into the book, if you like. So that's one thing. The first thing I think is selecting the right platform. So we don't try and spread ourselves too thinly. We go where we know our followers are going to be. So we stick to certain social platforms. So we don't go crazy for Wisden, the cricketer's almanac, which is read mostly by 50-something men in pubs or on cricket fields. We don't go onto Instagram. They quite like Google Plus and things like that. Believe it or not, yeah, there are people out there, or even I don't know, LinkedIn and other things. So go where your audience are. We engage with them. We interact with them. It's very much a two-way thing. We try and respond to them, and we try and be really genuine. And I think the love for the books comes through. So it's a lot of effort and a lot of work, but it really pays off. So, I don't know why, Jacqueline's obviously...
She's
oh no,
she's kind of a different stage of life. It's
okay.
Infectious.
Well, I think we've been hopefully giving you a few tips and advice and a real insight there, because I think everybody's come from a slightly different backgrounds, and it's so interesting, especially I think with Alison telling the story of Raven and having some examples. I know we've covered a lot of ground. We've still got 15 minutes or so. So should we take some questions for the floor? Lisa will, if you can just stand up and kind of, if you need a microphone.
Do you want to jump in? Do you mind standing up? And
No, that's absolutely fine.
just so everyone can hear you, if that's all right.
Do you want to say if you want to address your question to a particular member of the panel or to...
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So there was a recent article in The Guardian about differences between US and UK print colours.
Yeah.
So is that something you take into account when you're brainstorming ideas? Okay, this suits the US audience, but this is UK.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I was unfortunately part of that article, and I got totally slaughtered in it, because they said, why is the UK? It started off talking about the differences between the Hillary Clinton jacket in the US and the Simon Schuster, I think, jacket in the UK, which my friend Jack designed. So this article came out, and then I got slated for Lincoln in the Bardo, and I was like, hang on a minute. Which is ridiculous, but it was written by someone who had an interest in the US cover, let's just say. So, so that wasn't particularly fair, but I think it is such a strange thing. I mean, I was saying earlier that, you know, I went on a holiday to New York a year and a half ago, and literally they have the same bestsellers as us in the bookshops, but completely different jackets, and it's a pure sensibility thing. So sometimes it works, like we have a New York office where we will share the cover designs if we're both publishing the same book, and sometimes they'll be like, oh my god, I did the Kate Tempest one, and they said, that's not going to work for us. And I was like, right, okay, so they did something completely different, which was exactly like what I'd done, which is very strange. But so there's stuff like that, but I think we will come to our cover meetings with US jackets, even if we're not part of it, you know, so it's not Bloomsbury USA. If it's a penguin jacket of, let's say, Lincoln in the Bardo, we'll show it alongside what we've done, and then we'll make a call then. But we don't really try to, because it's almost like trying to copy a different way of thinking. You know, they have their sensibilities so strongly, and so ours is, I don't know, it's very strange. But yeah, it's an odd thing.
And all of those challenges that Greg just mentioned in export markets, we're up against that every day. So often, so with Lincoln in the Bardo, we don't have rights in all export markets, so we're up against the Penguin edition, and their edition is very dark, isn't it? It looks very different to our edition. So it's about encouraging customers to support the UK edition. Some customers will support both, so you'll go into a bookshop and both editions will be side by side, and that's actually a really pleasing moment. I remember going to a bookshop in Paris when we just published And the Mountains Echoed, and it was our edition, it was the Penguin edition, and it was the translated edition too, which I just thought, this is such a great moment, because this is offering these customers every single version of this book, and so from a sales perspective that's always a really pleasing time when you see that. So but in the Philippines, you know, they will only support US editions. In a lot of other Asian countries too, but especially there, they just wouldn't consider buying a British edition. So it's an ongoing challenge, really. So
yeah, it's very strange. There was another cover this summer called Forest Dark by Nicole Krauss, and it was a funny one because I'd heard, it was like, right, this is her masterwork, I've got to do a really good cover. Just like, right, I'll try my hardest. So I came up with something, went to the author, it went back for tweaks. In the meantime, the American publisher hired someone from the UK to do their version, which got rejected in favour of mine. So it was quite funny. So it ended up, Forest Dark was used worldwide. But yeah, that doesn't happen very often. But does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, cool.
Any more?
Sorry. Yeah.
Do I stand up?
Yes, please.
Question for Alison. I was just wondering, you were talking about how you had to structure the list so that everything had space. So you had your ghost story, and then you had your Inception / Agatha Christie story. And I was wondering, what happens if a book comes along that you absolutely love, but it's kind of too close to, so say it was another ghost story. Does your heart kind of take precedence over the structure of the list? Do you ever have that sort of conflict?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think you have to think about it and think about what it's doing. So I had a few people that sent me ghost stories because they know I love them, and I just didn't feel they were as good as Laura's. I think if someone came on and I thought it was doing something completely different and exciting, I would do another ghost story, but it would have to be, I'd have to have a message I could take back to everyone here that was different, because I think so much of what you do in publishing is about getting that pitch right. So the author pitches to an agent, the agent pitches to me, I pitch to all of my colleagues, you pitch to your customers. And sometimes that's not the same pitch, sometimes we're modifying as we go along, but it's so important, I think, to have the message. And I think if you've gone out and said, this is a really good ghost story, if I did another one, it would have to be doing something very different. So I could do a modern ghost story, I think, or one set in another country. But you just want to think about what's making it. I mean, there are only so many plots in the world, so my publishing career, I'm probably going to end up doing another ghost story at one point, but hopefully I'll be doing something very, very different. And I will be able to publish it in a very different way. And also you do have time as well between books, and obviously lots of ghost stories exist already. I'm not the only one that's published one. But I think as long as I can say something different, and as long as I feel I'm doing my book justice, because I have said no to things where I've been like, they're really good, but you know what, I've already got something in a similar territory, and I don't think that's fair on the author. Like, I do take it really seriously that my responsibilities to my authors, they might have spent years writing this book, and I want to publish it as well as I can. And if I'm thinking there are factors that might compromise that, then quite often I will say, I'm not the right publisher for this. I mean, quite often I say no to books that I think are very good, but I just don't love them. And as Petra was saying, it's a long process. You keep talking to lots of people about your books. And you have to feel completely honest about them. And there was a book I passed on recently that's at auction at the moment for lots of money. I could have published that, it probably would have sold lots of copies, but I would have known deep down I didn't love it in the way that I love all of these. And I think that's one piece of advice I would give you as an editor, if that's what you want to be, is you do have to know how to publish, and you need to know what you can publish well. And there are books I've said no to because I just don't know how I would do them. Similarly, like my 7 Deaths one, I think there are lots of people that just wouldn't know what to do with that. So it's kind of, it's the balance of your list, but it's also what you love, what you feel you can say about a book as well, I think. So there's a kind of science and a gut instinct that kind of meld together, I think, in editing.
The others? Yeah. Go.
I have a question about acquisition, but it may apply to all of you, because we currently work in a very small independent publishing house, and I like to describe it as like organised chaos in terms of acquisition, where they're like, I've acquired this book and we're going to publish it in 6 months, and I work in marketing and publicity, and that makes it quite difficult. You know, when you hear about all these lovely campaigns, and it's like, we acquired this book 2 years ago, and so you can plan.
I was going to say.
And I've also worked in a much larger publishing firm where you go to the acquisition meetings and that you get excited a long time in advance. So I was just wondering, in Bloomsbury, where you have that mix of being a larger firm but with an independent feel, whether there's like an average acquisition time, or like as a salesperson or as an editorial, where you have like that kind of ideal acquisition time, where you think you can get the balance between getting in the market when it's primed for a certain type of book, but also giving it enough time and space to get all the marketing and publicity, you know, getting those endorsements in time, whereas if it's coming out in 6 months, you can't really get some of the big names to give you a quote.
You know, I would say that generally I aim to do a year, because I think for fiction, non-fiction is very different, because you normally buy non-fiction on proposal. So I've bought some non-fiction recently which we won't be published until 2020, I think that's right. So a year is ideal, but my theory is always, if you can do 80 to 90% of your stuff on time, then you've got a little bit of freedom to be able to crash things in, because if you're doing it all the time, it's exhausting. It also, I think, depends on what the book is. So I would say there are certain books, if the pitch is so strong, you don't need people to have read it and passed it on and fallen in love with it bit by bit. One of my colleagues buys a lot of non-fiction from the States, and she's able to crash things in because quite often she's buying stuff because the US have already got a lot of the work underway, so they might already have the endorsement she needs.
I think we had a day to design the cover.
One of them.
And then
That was it.
we had a day, and we had to, the next morning we had to go and present them in a private meeting.
Yeah.
And then it went to press the following week. Believe it or not. So
You can
You can do it.
you can do it.
There's a non-ideal window as well, if you like, because the problem about, and Jacqueline will probably talk a bit more about this, is if you put things in too late, you miss the catalogues, you miss the 9 months in advance sending the stuff to Nielsen, to Amazon, to everybody else. That you need that lead up, you need that build up time. So dropping something in with very you miss some opportunities. You miss the chats at London Book Fair, at Frankfurt, or wherever. So 6 months to a year, 9 months to a year is it kind of the whole system works. The whole system works that way. It's not to say you can't get around it, and in certain areas, like Alison says, you can, but I think it puts additional pressures on marketing and publicity a lot of the time, and there's a reason, not always good reasons, because occasionally you want to get out a book straight away. You know, if people have won Olympic medals or they've won Bake Off or whatever, you want to be right in that sweet spot and have things ready to go. But you still have to have done a lot of groundwork and preparation. I mean, Jacqueline can probably talk much more about,
I
the
think
sales and the
from the
timing
UK
impact.
side, from the trade sales team, I mean, typically they're selling about 10 months ahead of publication. And because these booksellers have so many publishers that visit them, there are very specific times and you have an allocated slot of an hour where you can go along and present your new titles. And so if it's a crash-in, like you said, it's really difficult to do that. I think you can get away with it because we don't do it very often. We do get away with it. In export markets, I mean, Libri, K&V and Peterson are 3 biggest wholesalers in Germany. It's about 7 months ahead of publication. So it really depends. I mean, the UK lead time and the US lead times are far longer than any of the export lead times where we go and present to customers. But it's interesting what you're saying. In India, we can publish a book in 6 weeks.
Wow.
You know, so the turnaround times and the expectations from customers. In South Africa, they prefer it if you've got a finished book to show them when you're selling to them. So it really varies depending on where you are in the world, but it does add extra pressure, but you can find a way around it. And I think it's just unavoidable. I think, like Alison says, if you love a book, if you know it's going to sell, Social Creatures is a little bit like that, isn't it? Where that will be a short lead time book for us, but you'll make it work and your customers will support you. So yeah, but I hear your pain.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think we probably, literary publishing, you normally have longer because your authors generally take longer to write their books and you can plan it quite far in advance. Commercial publishing is normally a much quicker turnaround, especially for non-fiction, like Petra was saying. You know, I have friends who've worked on a lot of, you know, the big celebrity books and your turnaround time is so short. I mean, I was at Random House, not in that division, when we published 50 Shades of Grey, and they published that in like a couple of weeks. And that was, I mean, everyone I think always assumes that book was a big deal. It was a big deal, but they made it a much bigger deal because their team really like had to work so hard. But they designed the jacket, printed it, did it, you know. But it did nearly kill them. So you know, don't aim for doing that. I would say if you can, a year is ideal. But sometimes it can help a little bit because then it's so exciting. When you've just bought a book, everybody wants to talk about it, and then you can get it in people's hands. But yeah, ideally, if you can have a bit longer, it's good.
I think we've got time probably for one more question because Louise wants to say a few words. So.
Sorry, it seems like I'm standing in the shower. In 2012, Will Self published Umbrella with Bloomsbury. And the other night he was at a talk and he said that when he presented it to Bloomsbury, his publisher broke out into a sweat because it was so different and experimental. But it then went on to go into the Man Booker shortlist and lost by, I think, 1 vote. This may be directed towards Petra, but is there now an appetite for difficult and experimental fiction, and how do you market that?
Well, we've talked a lot about Lincoln in the Bardo tonight, mentioning it, and I think that is very experimental and different, and so I think yes. We're sadly no longer publishing Will Self because the editor who he worked with closely here wasn't around for a while, so he went off. But Umbrella, yeah, that did really well. I think it was Wolf Hall that just picked him to it, wasn't it, that year? So and he was very, very close. So yeah, I think so. I mean, I was saying to somebody earlier as well that I think the so it seems to me like everything in the landscape is very varied now. There's many more voices. It's much more kind of much. There are so many different platforms, ways for people to express themselves, and yet people still love stories and they still love coming back to books. And I think the more people who are doing their own thing, we're publishing more and more people like Sarah J. Maas, who's one of our leading young adult American writers. She started off as a blogger and she's very, very prolific, but we're signing up more and more bloggers, more and more people who've kind of come from different backgrounds, have got different stories to tell. And so I think there's always an appetite for that, and I think people, they're working across different media, like somebody like Kate Tempest. We publish the books that built the houses. She's a poet. A lot of the writers who come in and authors who do author lunches are poets, like Jenny Zhang came in, who wrote Sour Heart, the short stories. They write poetry, they write short stories, they write novels. So I think that makes people more creative, if you like. So George Saunders had been writing all these fabulous short stories, and then he sits down and writes this very strange kind of novel that reads a bit like a play or whatever. So I think the more, sorry, sort of wobbling off a bit here, but